Meeting to order. We'll begin with the roll call. Druffel? Here, great. Glover? Hurt? Here. Mendez? Pulley? Roten? Not here yet. Sledge? Great. Sawara? Very good. Syracuse? Toombs? Okay. Van Reese? There you are. And Vircher. Good to see you. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3. I got you. Thank you. Madam Previous Chair. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 of us here, and I expect we'll be joined by our 13th shortly. Let's begin with, we had a request from Metro Waste Services to give us a quick update on the Red River Waste Services, and I would like to invite y'all to the public table. Let us know where things stand.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm John Honeysucker, the Assistant Director of Waste Services. As stated before, one of our top priorities with transparency is to make sure that we update the Council each and every week on the operational readiness of the division. And so, again, I want to start with that because we have some other news that we would like to discuss with the Council also today. Operational readiness, currently, our front loaders, we have a total of 10. We have currently 0 that are operational. We have 4 rentals that we are working with right now. Our rear loaders, the 18-yard rear loaders, we have 34 total. Currently, we have 11 of those that are operational. We have 5 8-yard rear loaders, and 2 of those are operational. We have 2 that are rented from big truck rental. Our side loaders, we have the 28-yarders. We have 24. Out of the 24, 8 of those are operational. The 8-yarders, we have 8, and out of those, 6 of those are operational. Our roll-off trucks, we have 11, and currently we have 3 of those that are operational, with 2 that are rented, and 1 that will be here tomorrow. That'll put us at a total of 6. Again, General Services and their team are doing as best as they can to try to get the parts, which if they can't get the parts, we can't fix them, and also funneling them out to the different vendors. And if the vendors don't have the staff to fix them, then the trucks will sit there, and they are currently sitting there. One of the commitments of our director is to make sure that we have safe vehicles for the employees and making sure that they're operational in the best form and fashion, and he's committed to doing that. So what I want to do now is I want to turn it over to Mr. Potter to talk about a little bit about the trash situation.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Scott Potter, Director of Metro Water Services. So you likely saw the press release we just issued. We're going to suspend curbside recycling most likely through January to focus exclusively on picking up the trash. One of our fundamental messages the whole time during this crisis that we've had with Red River has been we are going to pick up the trash, and that's going to be the fundamental goal. So it's unfortunate that we're having to do this, but the priority is a public health issue, which is picking up trash, and the secondary issue, unfortunately, is recycling. We do have the recycle centers that are open, and that's in the press release as well. So our citizens do have an alternative to taking the recycling to the convenience centers. I would like to implore our citizens not to put your recycling in the trash can. We need your assistance in maintaining your recycling practices, but just take them to the convenience centers so we don't fill up the trash bins with recycling. That's a personal ask on my part to my fellow citizens. And at this point, that's really the operational update. Red River is not trending favorably. They're essentially 1 day behind now. And John is going to take over 5 routes tomorrow with Metro assets. And I predict that if circumstances don't improve, the number of routes that we'll have to take will increase over time. We're working diligently to get emergency contracts in place, but there's kind of a, I was going to use the word perfect storm, but that's kind of not a nice thing to say because of the tornadoes. But the storms in Kentucky took assets from a provider in Bowling Green that we were going to rely on. Those assets are going to tornado recovery in Kentucky. So we're not going to be able to get those assets as earlier as we thought we were going to be able to get them. But we're working as quickly as we can with purchasing to get those contracts in place to get more providers in town to help Metro take over the trash routes so we can reestablish the recycling routes. So what questions do y'all have?
I'll start with one and then I'll recognize Councilmember Glover. Will you be able to increase the frequency of pickup at the recycling centers to take on the extra materials that are going to be showing up there?
Okay, we have 10 drop-off centers located throughout the county. We're going to change up our structure on that, and I want to also acknowledge my team here. These guys have done a fantastic job of working in the waste division, and I appreciate the efforts that they're making to make sure that this transition is successful. But yes, ma'am, we're going to restructure that. We're going to have roll-off trucks working 3 shifts to make sure that the convenience drop-off locations are adequately serviced to make sure nothing will be overflowing. Also, we're encouraging the constituent to utilize the convenience centers, the 4 convenience centers throughout the city, where we've increased instead of the 2-bag minimal. We ask that we're actually raising that to 5 without a fee to help support this transition for this temporary time.
And can you remind us again when that's starting? January when is the recycling suspended as of?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Glover.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't know which one of you guys, I need to ask the question. I'm assuming, Director, you're standing there, so I'll ask you. I think we've all been following the Red River, and it's not surprising to me that we're in the predicament we are now. I think any of us that can forecast out how things were, how they continue to be, and where they certainly are headed to, understand the dilemma that you and the department has. And this is merely this is really not a question. It's kind of a suggestion more than anything else. There's got to be perhaps some fallout from Red River of employees that are unsatisfied with where they are. I don't know if there's a possibility of helping to pick up some of those to bring on with us or some of these other companies, because I do know that you guys have been diligent over the last week, 2 weeks, whatever it's been now, time's kind of melting, on trying to get additional companies to come in and help with this. So it's merely a suggestion, and maybe you've tried it. I don't know if you have or have not, but I think at this point you guys are certainly behind an 8 ball here, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate the gentlemen and ladies, if there, I don't know if there's, but I appreciate all of you guys doing what you're doing, guys and gals, if there happens to be both. But you know, thank you very, very much, because I know we're heading into a busy time. We'll get through this, but and also I'm thankful that we're expanding the service as far as trying to be able to take care of the folks of Nashville. So thank you.
Yes, sir. We need Red River to meet their contract, so we're going to try not to raid their equipment or their people initially. But they are qualified people, so if circumstances present themselves that they want to come work for Metro, then we all know what a lovely place Metro is to work, and we'll welcome them here. I do want to personally recognize the gentleman to my right as well. And also, it goes without saying, John Honeysucker, without his work, there'd be lots of bad words coming out of my mouth. And John is doing a really spectacular job, as well as a lot of other folks in Metro Water as well. But I do appreciate that, sir.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, you know the way I think. I mean, I think business-wise, it's contingency. Realizing that we all need for Red River to fulfill its contract. It doesn't look promising. I mean, I'm just calling it the way it is.
Yes, sir.
And so therefore, I guess from a contingency standpoint of thinking ahead, that was merely the reason for my comment.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And John, thank you too.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank everyone for a great work as well. I think probably everybody knows, but I want to echo for the sake of the viewing audience. Since Red River is not fulfilling its contract, is there an adjustment financially to what we are responsible for?
I think we have Miss Amanda Deaton-Moyer who's going to address that one.
Yes, ma'am. We pay Red River by their routes, and for the routes that they do not perform, they do not get paid for. And we're also reviewing contract terms to consider other options.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair, for the recognition, even though I'm not a member of this particular committee. So what I heard, well, I heard a number of things. A couple of things that I heard. One is that, Red River is not meeting the terms of the contract, and we're looking to pick up slack, but we have sort of this lack of equipment to do so. So I just wanted to know, a little bit about how did we get, I realize that this is sort of a conflagration of factors that have put us in a really bad position, trying to avoid the same metaphor you were trying to avoid there. Is it parts? Is the issue that we can't get parts for the trucks? If the parts showed up tomorrow, do we have folks who are trained and skilled in servicing the equipment? What does General Services need to better support its fleet management mission?
I see Ms. Velvet Hunter coming to address that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Velvet Hunter with the Department of General Services. Thank you for that question. And it's a good question. And what we've said for years in fleet is if we had the money, we would be in good shape because the fleet's old. And now we're having to say, the money's helping. The money's helping. We've been given a lot of money to replace this old fleet, and we've got things on order, and things are starting to come in. But we really are facing a situation where the vendors that we use to repair these trucks, they don't have adequate labor. They don't have access to parts to repair these trucks. So we're visiting these vendors every day. We're pressuring them. We're explaining the health importance of picking up the trash, but they have a backlog at these vendors, and they can't get it done either. So it's really not even a matter of funding. So we're working closely with Water Services to come up with small things we can do to improve that, repairs that we can do in-house to maybe keep more trucks on the road. But I know that's a long answer, but that's kind of where we are. Thank you.
If I may follow up.
One more.
Just anecdotally speaking with folks across Metro departments, kind of rank and file workers, I've heard a lot of concern about some of the changes, recent changes and reliance on vendors for our fleet services. Was the big shift there, just looking back, I went and read all of the general services budgets from the last decade the other night, and it seems like every year there were targeted cuts that they said, this is going to be rough. And then I think it was the 20 or the 22 budget, there was 40 FTEs
Right.
from fleet. Is that sort of the big shift that we've had in recent years about how Nashville handled its fleet management, that to increased our reliance on contractors and vendors?
Yeah, that shift did happen in fiscal year 21, and I think it was 43 positions. So we basically took the funding for those 43 positions and used that for contracted services for fleet. But I will say General Services requested that change because we felt we were having trouble getting mechanics. We felt like mechanics were plentiful in the community at that time. We felt like we went from one heavy shop and one light shop to dozens of places that Metro agencies could take their vehicles for repair, and that was not a bad situation until those vendors became overloaded, until they couldn't get the parts, until they couldn't get the mechanics. It was a good model. So we were proactive in moving to that model based on our difficulty in hiring mechanics, keeping mechanics. But you're exactly right. We did transition 43 FTEs in fiscal year 21.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good
thank
question.
you.
Councilmember Druffel. Whoop, you'll need a microphone. You recognize.
Okay, thanks. Since this is coming at us at a time with the holidays coming up, is there an alternative schedule that you're looking at? Because I could just see this happening. I know it's you can't predict everything, but I got a feeling we're going to start to get a lot of emails. Is there some way that we can get something out earlier than later?
Yes, sir. We're meeting on this daily.
Okay.
So quite honestly, we don't know what we're going to be doing on Wednesday because we may need to even take more routes. So as soon as we know any changes to our operational schedule, we will let you know. But I'm not going to say what we're doing on Thursday because I don't know.
Okay, so right now, the schedule as is.
Yes, sir.
And you're taking up the slack, and we don't see, at least in the near future, that that's going to change.
I do anticipate changes. I just don't know what they are.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. And y'all have done a good job of communicating with us, which is really helpful. So we'll continue to look for that. Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think it was around this time last year that we started having issues with Red River. And I keep asking the same question over and over and over again. How did we get to this point? You know, it just doesn't make sense. If we can sit here and forecast that what we heard earlier from Director Potter, I knew that was going to happen, even though they said they had it and they were going to be able to handle it. But I'm concerned. I know that I have been working with Public Works for a very long time, and Mr. Jackson has always been very, very responsive to me. And this is the first time I've heard of this. And we appreciate the others that have worked to help with the situation. But something happened within for us to be dealing with this without. So I'm still wondering, how do we get to the core of the problem? What happened, and how are we going to address that and fix it and hold somebody accountable? Because I'm sitting in other committee meetings and they're trying to hold people accountable for receiving money. And now we are paying money and we are not getting the services. So I think we've got things kind of mixed up around here, and I just want to know what we're going to do about it.
Thank you for that question, Councilor Hurd. One thing I always, as each of you know me, I believe in transparency. I believe in utilizing the council as a partner and having a partnership with the council on anything that I am a part of or under the leadership of Director Potter. Councilor Hurd, I want to try to touch bases on historically. We're not in a position, we, as in Metro Water and Waste Services, as currently, are not in position to answer the historical concerns that have taken place. What I can do is focus on where we are now and let you know that we are working diligently along with the council to make sure that we resolve any concerns that we have. Now, will it be fixed today? Absolutely not. Will it be fixed tomorrow? Absolutely not. We want it to be fixed next week. But you have my ultimate commitment from us to make sure that we work diligently to work starting now to making this thing work successfully for each and every one of us. This is going to be an ongoing concern. That's why today, as I've asked before, I'm soliciting you as council members to help us to make this a success. And I think we will make a success. We are trending in the right directions, and I trust and believe we're at the bottom, but we're going up.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Mendez and then Councilmember Van Rees.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I just wanted to comment. I know y'all have seen in Director Potter's emails that I've been involved in some of the conversations about this, and I just want to underscore he and his team are, John, everybody, it is literally an everyday job trying to figure out how to do this, and at every step of the way, Director Potter has directed everybody, like he said here today, that getting the garbage picked up is the #1 goal. Unfortunately, there's a big old bankruptcy case in Texas going on right now that has rules and laws, and it's just not as easy as us doing whatever we want to do. And I just want to say I've got confidence in how the team is going and what Mr. Honeysucker just said about hopefully we're at the bottom and in a position to be putting Metro resources into making it start be better. I believe in that, and I think we're headed in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Van Rees.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. First of all, in regard to local disposal vendors, I was wondering, even if it's temporary contracts, keeping in mind like J. McMurtry and things in my district, that, you know, are there trucks available that we can provide some small business assistance by getting them to help that already know routes and that kind of thing. The second thing is in regard to recycling, and Ms. Smith may want to help. We've worked very, very hard to change habits, right? And so we're saying now, like, you know, all that cardboard that you're about to get for Christmas or have, you know, you're going to need to take that somewhere. There's I think that an opportunity for education in regard to how to properly bring your things to the recycling centers, because we're kind of now used to putting all plastic and cardboard and everything in the thing and going. If we're now putting those things in the trunk of our car or in the back of our truck to arrive properly with those items so that we can help folks know it's less painful when they get there as to what to do with it. And then I know that we don't want them to suddenly just start throwing them in the trash again, but we know that that's going to happen, which is going to cause more trash. So how can we proactively make sure that we're letting folks know? So those two items I'm curious about.
And I see Sharon Smith.
I'm going to
behind you,
triage all those questions generally, and then John will handle his efforts towards getting contractors in place. Amanda will talk about the procurement and the challenges inherent in that, especially emergency contracts. And then Sharon can conclude with instructions about how to prepare and transport and put your recycling in the containers. But generally speaking, we're exploring every possible avenue. And I don't mean that lightly. We've been discussing this for a month, and actually longer than that, about what we're going to do incrementally to prevent trash from piling up on the streets. So we've reached the point where we're taking routes from Red River as we need to maintain schedule. If Red River demonstrates a continued inability and their trend is continued to be negative, we will assume more routes with assets that we can get. So John can speak to his efforts to get the contracts. Amanda can talk about the procurement, and Sharon can talk about the methods.
Councilmember Van Rees, I have reached out, not only been reaching out to different vendors, local vendors. I've reached out utilizing networks such as calling the council members and asking if they have anyone that is that they can refer me to, besides Council Lady Vercher. But I've reached out to numerous vendors here, and unfortunately, they're in the same position as a lot of people are. They don't have either the staff or the vehicles to assume the routes that we have.
As for the procurement piece, this will fall under an emergency situation, and we can fall into the emergency regulations under the procurement code. John and his team have also, before this emergency came up, his team had already begun the process for adding services in the annex or the annexed area, and they added a piece of that to include emergency services. So as that contract comes into way, and it closed last week, and they met as an evaluation team. So we were actually we're moving towards a contract, and we're moving as quickly, and the procurement office has been wonderful and been helping us with that. That is a process, and it's a process with a lot of pieces to it. So we're actually taking a two-pronged approach, which is the emergency process, which as soon as we have people that are available that can bring trucks and bring people and pick up trash, we'll do that. But also we'll have a further actual contract that you'll see once it gets through the process.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. So, Councilor Lady Van Rees, you're absolutely right. People are accustomed to, those that live in the urban service district taking their stuff, putting it in the cart, rolling it to the curb. And working with Sonia Allman, who's the Public Information Officer for Metro Water Services, we've started putting together social media and other information that we can send to you all to send out in your newsletters, because people will, it'll be a little different. Cardboard and is separate from paper, and then you've got your plastic bottles and metal and aluminum cans can go in together. So we're going to be trying to put together information that we'll put on social media, but that we'll also send to you all to send out to your constituents to just kind of give them a leg up. We're also going to be spending some time trying to put together some, waste reduction tips and how people can, reduce some of the waste that they generate over the holidays. I mean, this is a difficult time of year. Christmas and New Year's, there's extra trash on the ground. So I think the more we can do that and provide information for you all to send out, I'm hoping that people will step up and, just like the director said, continue their commitment to recycling and waste reduction.
Just as a matter of follow-up, anything that you can do in regard to just video of real-life situations? What if I only have so much room in the trunk of my car and I'm going to take something on the way to work? What's more important for me to take? How do I take that? Do I put it in a bag? Do I dump the bag? I mean, like really hands-on, real-life examples, I think, are going to be more successful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to let council members who haven't spoken yet go next. So, Councilmember Vercher.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just need to know, when is it going to be resolved? I understand that there's been great efforts underway, but Southeast, this has been going on for 2 years. I was back here looking at my emails. So we've been dealing with this for 2 years. Last year, we called an emergency Southeast-wide meeting because the issue was just so disastrous, and I'm being light with my words here. So I want to know what I can set the expectation for my constituents, so that every week I'm not bombarded with calls and emails and complaints about the services that they're not receiving.
Thank you. Mr. Potter.
The bad news is that the Red River contract is in effect until November of 2024. So either they recover and they start to meet their contract, or they don't. So we're planning on if they don't. The goal is they do, but being the responsible operators that we are, we're making plans to assume more and more responsibility for their contract as they indicate they can't meet it. But one thing that Sharon didn't mention that she's also doing is we're doing a study of best practices of waste collection around the nation, and we're going to bring forth a contract, a variety of options to council about how we are going to handle waste management in the future. It'll be a combination it'll be either all Metro or exclusively contracted. I assume that it's going to be somewhere in the middle, but what we're going to do is we're not going to put all of our eggs in one basket like we have found ourselves currently. But as Councilmember Mendez said, we are in a bankruptcy proceeding, and while I'm not a lawyer and don't endeavor to become one, there are all kinds of processes that we have to go through to ensure that we don't run afoul of the rules. And Metro Legal is making sure that we do that so we don't cause more harm than we already have.
Thank you. Any other council members who haven't spoken yet? Councilmember Vercher, any other comments?
Just a follow-up. So basically, we don't have an answer as to when this will be resolved for the city. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's
Yes,
what I'm
ma'am.
hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess that's the answer to my question too, is that we really don't know what happened and where this started. But I would like to know if there is a contingency plan or emergency plan that you all are executing, considering, as Councilmember Virtue said it was 2 years. I just recall the really big issue last year. Did you all have an emergency plan in place? And have you gone back to evaluate to see what was good and not so good about it, considering that we've been in this place with Red River for that long of a time?
Well, I can only speak to July 1 going forward, and on that day, we began the process of contingency planning for this circumstance.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate y'all keeping us up to date, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. If you'll continue to update us, that's very helpful. And are there any other council members? Mr. Potter.
Can I make one more?
Yes, sir.
I need to make my closing plea to my fellow citizens. Back in 2010, when we had the flood, I made a personal request to everybody to reduce their water usage, and my fellow citizens, helped us out with that. We really need everybody to help us out with this as well. Please don't put your recycling in the trash. Use the convenience centers. Reduce your footprint as much as you can, but we are going to need your help to get through this. So thank you very much for that.
We'll spread that word. Councilmember Archer, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a budget and finance question. Can we anticipate as a committee that they would be coming back for a supplemental for operations or additional funding for capital as well? And if so, are we talking about 31 million? Are we talking about 45 million? What are we talking about, so that as a committee we can go ahead and start anticipating that?
Thank you. Mr. Potter.
The 6-month request we made recently was for 2.3 million for rentals. I expect that minimally to happen again in probably 3 months. We'll come back to this committee to request an unspecified amount of money that will not be less than $3 million, and would likely be more than that, because we're going to need to rent vehicles to meet demand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the trash. So to do that, we're going to need trucks. And if we don't have them with fleet, we have to get them somewhere else. And we're not going to be shy about letting y'all know what we need, but we're going to pick up the trash.
Thank you. Ms. Deaton-Moyer, anything to add to that?
Amanda also mentioned that when these new vendors do come online, we'll need to pay them as well, and they're not in the budget presently.
Okay, well, any forward anticipation information you can give us would be appreciated.
Yes, ma'am.
All good questions. Thank you so much. All right, that was an important update, and now we will get to the business on the agenda. I will begin with and thank you all for being here. I will begin with the consent agenda. We have quite a few numbers, a few items on here. Please let me know if anything needs to be bumped. I will read out the numbers, and then I'll go back and read captions. RS 2021-1277, RS 2021-1283, 1284, 1285, 1286, 1287, 1288, 1289, RS 2021-1294, 1295, RS 2021-1297, 1298, 1299, 1300, and on second reading, BL 2021-1024. Do any of those items need to be bumped? Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair. Can you please bump 1294?
1294. BL 2021. I'm sorry. 1294. Is that an?
RS.
Okay, gotcha. 1294 is bumped. Let me make sure I. Okay, any others? Seeing none, I'll read through the captions of the ones that are on consent. RS 2021-1277 sponsors Allen, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the personal injury claims of Devon and Rich Jinks against Metro government in the amount of $70,000. RS 2021-1283, sponsors Allen, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the property damage claim against BOP Nest Nashville LLC, Cambridge Swinerton Incorporated, Hayward Baker Incorporated, and Keller North America Incorporated in the amount of $128,570.12. RS 2021-1284, sponsors Allen, Withers, and others, approves a hazard mitigation grant from the Tennessee Department of Military, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metro Department of Water and Sewage Services, and authorizes the acquisition and demolition of 7 houses located in various floodways, floodplains in Davidson County. RS 2021-1285, sponsors Allen, Hancock, and Stiles, adopts a fee schedule associated with the processing and review of appeals made to the Short-Term Rental Appeals Board. RS 2021-1286, sponsors Allen, Evans, and Welsh, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to improve public health response to substance misuse epidemic in the Middle Tennessee high-impact area. RS 2021-1287, sponsors Allen, Evans, Welsh, and Stiles, approves an amendment to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to promote the proper use of all recommended vaccines and respond to vaccine-preventable diseases in collaboration with the CDC and other partners. RS 2021-1288, sponsors Allen, Evans, and Welsh, approves an amendment to a contract between the Metro Board of Health and Vanderbilt University to participate as a member site in the CDC Tuberculosis Trials Consortium studies. RS 2021-1289, sponsors Allen, Evans, Bradford, and Stiles, approves a grant from the Friends of Metro Animal Care and Control to the Metro Board of Health to provide funding for a foster program for shelter animals. RS 2021-1295, sponsors Allen, Bradford, and others, approves a child-adult care food program grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Metro Parks and Recreation Department to provide nutritious meals and snacks for children attending after-school programs in 9 park locations. RS 2021-1297, sponsors Allen, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the property damage claim of Embassy Suites by Hilton against Metro government in the amount of $15,229. RS 2021-1298, sponsors Allen and Evans, approves a hazardous materials emergency preparedness grant from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metro Office of Emergency Management to provide resources to procure items, training, and/or equipment for hazardous materials preparedness. RS 2021-1299, sponsors Allen, Evans, and Suara, approves an emergency management performance grant from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Office of Emergency Management to subsidize an emergency management program. RS 2021-1300, sponsors Allens, Evans, and others, approves a Tennessee Safe Courts grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metro Office of Family Safety to update the Gene Crow Advocacy Center to increase storage space and repaint client and child hat traffic areas. RS 2021-1024, this is on second reading, sponsor Stiles, Allen, and others, declares a certain planned road on the Orchard Bend Park property to be a public right-of-way and granting a temporary access easement. Those are the items on consent. Are there any that further need to be pulled? Seeing none, can I have a motion on the consent agenda? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda say aye. Consent agenda is recommended. Now we'll move to bills not on consent. That begins with RS 2021-1260, sponsors Sepulveda, Johnston, Gamble, and others, appropriates $20,200,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funds to supplement the Barnes Fund for affordable housing purchase and to create a centralized database of subsidized housing. Do we have a motion? And there is a substitute for this one, Councilmember Sledge. You recognize.
Thank you, Chair. I'd move my substitute for purposes of discussion.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Councilmember Sledge, you want to give a brief explanation?
Yes, so this substitute doubles the proposed amounts in the original bill to $20 million each for the Barnes Fund and the Catalyst Fund. This was done after consultation with about everybody I could find regarding affordable housing construction and development, as well as with the ARP committee, who unanimously endorsed it, as well as the Housing Trust Fund Commission, who also endorsed it. This will allow for a robust spring funding round for Barnes, and it will allow us to start our Barnes Fund at a level that will allow it to leverage funds at a much greater rate, a much higher ratio. And I'll also note that Ms. Hannah Davis is here as well from the mayor's office, who knows all the info in and out, and she can fill in all the gaps that I have left.
Thank you. And I would like to recognize Ms. Davis to give a repeat of what you did in affordable housing, if you would do that, please.
Gladly. Thank you so much, everybody. Very exciting night for affordable housing. The Catalyst Fund specifically, which is what Councilmember Allen asked me to speak to in the previous committee, is a tool that was recommended by the Affordable Housing Task Force earlier this year to supplement the Barnes Fund. Barnes Fund is grants to our affordable housing developers for planned projects. It's methodical and requires a significant amount of lead time to make sure they have site control and the appropriate zoning. But what's missing, obviously, in this dynamic real estate market is a tool that helps affordable housing developers compete with market rate developers to secure properties that are either maybe naturally occurring affordable housing or were previously subsidized and will be expiring, as we call them. And so, you know, those are the stories that you hear about in the news where 300 people receive, you know, a month's notice. And currently, it's just really hard with the various levels of capital that folks are using for an affordable housing development deal to be able to move quickly and secure something, you know, on both the price and deal terms that our market rate developers are moving at. So the Catalyst Fund would be structured in a way that is able to be quick moving, and then it will also, you know, obviously work with our additional affordable housing financing tools and the monitoring that goes along with those to ensure that it stays, the property that's acquired stays affordable.
Thank you. And can you mention the possibility of money?
Oh, certainly. Thank you
back
for
in?
reminding me of that. So while Barnes are grants that go out the door and require additional operating, again, very important equity for our affordable housing development, this tool will be able to refill its own coffers, whether it's a debt or equity, and those terms will be influenced by our third party that will be recruiting. We want someone who's experienced in managing a fund like this. It will live outside of Metro so that it can move extremely quickly on these properties that we're seeing, but then it will be repaid so the money can go out again to be able to continue to do more of this work.
Thank you. And that the question that came up in affordable housing was, will there always be a requirement when this money is used that the new property is affordable?
Yes. So that part, again, will be influenced by the third party. Traditionally, state tax credits require a minimum of 15. It's typically 30 years. Barnes requires 30 years. But we will always be pushing for even longer if we can. There's some gray area in state law about what we'd be able to do there, but that may be one advantage of being able to use a third party as well, is that the funds could be used for even longer affordability.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Councilmember Sledge for leading this effort. But I wanted to add that as a new member of the Housing Fund Commission, something that the commissioners said that was very powerful, and I think they were even going to send a letter, I don't know if we got to that, was that Councilmember Sledge wanted to make sure that all the fund will be utilized. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that this additional money is very much needed. The list of grantees that are going out, the amount of money going out this time, it's over 16 million, the largest we've ever done, and we have about 14 applicants, and the fund is able to approve everyone. And I think that having this additional money will allow us to be able to do a whole lot more. And so I wanted to thank him for his foresight and everyone that supported it, that this is the move in the right direction, and we just need to do this. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Well, what I'm about to say is not going to be a surprise to anyone. I won't be supporting this because as we keep spending borrowed money, and which is exactly what it is, inflation is rising more rapidly than it has in decades in our country. It's going to continue to do so. Our debt here in Metro Nashville is climbing. We're now projected at almost 16% of operating budget. And so I can't support these things because it's almost counterproductive for affordable housing, because you're not going to be able to afford to build housing for basically anyone. So, you know, I just really wish that we'd put the brakes on some of this stuff and quit looking at this as though it's free money, because there's no such thing as free money. even though it may be coming from Washington, is still being printed, and that's what's driving our inflationary numbers like it is right now. I will be supporting the next one because it's our police department, and that's something that's been desperately needed. I'd support that regardless of where it was coming from. But the rest of this, I can't, and I won't give any more speeches on this tonight because it'd be the same song I'd be singing, but that's why. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sledge, was your hand raised or? No, okay. Councilmember Vercher.
Chair, you are good. You didn't even make eye contact with me, so I wasn't for certain if you saw my hand or not. So I just want to go back down memory lane. Just want to make sure that I'm accurate. Barnes Fund created 2013. We've yielded how many units thus far?
Not including this last round, almost 2,500 units.
2,500 units in 8 years?
7, since it's not including this last, yes.
7 years. With this additional funding, how many units are we expected to yield over what period of time?
We will put all 20 million of the Barnes dollars out in our spring round, which should be released in late February, early March, contracts to you all in early summer. And Barnes units average about $20,000 in per unit. So again, depends on the applications we receive, but for $20 million, it could do, 1,000 units.
All right, just want to make sure. So for 20 million, we're getting 1,000 units. Okay. All right. Next question. Do we have a plan where these units would go or no?
We receive applications from our nonprofit partners, and so we don't mandate where the units will go. We do look at our spread across the county, and we track what units are in which council districts.
Okay, and I asked that because in talking to developers, I had a developer roundtable, and frankly, what I walked away with was they can't build anything affordable in the core. So what does that mean? That means they're looking to target the suburbs where we're already busting at the seams. We just had Metro Water here talking about how they can't get the trash collected and don't know when that's going to be collected. So we need a plan. I think at the end of the day, as a body, we all want to make sure that we're trying to address the needs of a growing city, right? But it has to be a holistic approach. It's too fragmented. We have a planning department that says they can't project or plan for growth. Now we're here talking about voting on an additional multi-million-dollar plan for affordable housing with no clear plan. And I don't even want to get into the LIHTC part of it because that introduces a whole nother variable of concentrating poverty in certain districts. This is really tough, Chair. It's really tough for us because the housing piece of affordability, that's one part of it. The other part of it, as it relates to planning, we're not even talking about that and having a real discussion as to where these units are going to be and who's going to be selected to build these units. And the reality of it is the cost of goods to build is beyond expensive for developers. And they said in the core, they cannot build anything affordable. This body, a couple of years ago, we passed a development framed for affordable housing behind Miss Mary's Barbecue. Those units are going for $500,000. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to suggest that there is a heat map that's been drawn that shows location of a combination of different types of affordability, and I'll make sure we get that provided to everyone. I think what you raise is a really important issue, Councilmember Vercher. And interestingly, if you layer the MDHA locations and the LIHTC and the Barnes, it begins to fill in more parts of the county than if you just look at one type of that. And I think that that's something that we don't often see when we look at this. So I will work with Ms. Davis to see if we can get that provided to people, because I think it's helpful to see how that does keep it all from happening in one part of town. There are some gaps that will be obvious that show up, but it's not all happening in the suburbs. Different tools, different work better in different parts of the county, and that's obvious with this map, so I would,
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair, for that support. I kind of get agitated about this when we have these affordable housing conversations, because we have a segment, we have a district council member here, he don't have any apartments, none, 0. But we want to sit in this chamber and tout about affordability. We don't even look to that district to build. What we want to do, we want to push density to other areas that's already stressed. And then I'm going to get off my bandwagon, Chair. Thank you so much for the indulgence.
Thank you. Let's see. Councilmember Sledge and then Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair. To address just a couple of points that came up, this is not issuing any debt. In fact, it's quite the opposite. This is as close to free money as we get. This is a grant. And then regarding sort of building in the urban core, this is why I find it critical actually to do this. So representing an urban core district, in different models and different avenues, I can think of 3 places in the district that I represent, 1,200 units that are either created or preserved, and they're all done through LIHTC models. If we are going to compete to build affordable housing at the volume and scale that we're talking about in the urban core, the Catalyst Fund is how we're going to do it, because it's what's going to bring us to a level playing field, especially on the preservation side, in order to compete with the market. And I know that Ms. Davis has talked a little bit about that. And the last point I want to bring up, regarding on the Barnes piece of it and affordability in the urban core, we're talking a lot about unit count, but one of the fundamental conversations that the Housing Trust Fund Commission had when I was on there, and I'm sure it's continuing with Councilmember Suara on there, is also the populations being housed. And there are populations that are housed through the Barnes Fund that otherwise, quite frankly, would go unhoused. And I'll give you an example in the district I represent. There are folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are housed in what are called friendship houses, in which they are paired with either students at Vanderbilt, or they're paired with veterans, or they're paired with seniors who are willing to live in a sort of communal space in which they, quite frankly, help each other. Those are Barnes funded. Those are Barnes funded houses, and quite frankly, a national model for how you are able to help house and ensure that folks with IDDs are able to have a high standard of living and enjoy living in the city, in the urban core, and be able to get around and hold jobs and have secure housing. And so I cannot speak highly enough to the need for this. I just don't want to get lost in yes, unit count is super important, and we talk about that a lot, but we also need to consider we have different tools to do different things.
Right.
This Catalyst Fund is the tool to help us compete on that market side to get housing where we couldn't get it otherwise. And the Barnes Fund helps do that, but also helps house populations who might otherwise have extreme difficulty finding housing.
Thank you. And I'll point out in 5 minutes, there's another charrette happening to talk about outdoor homelessness, which is a huge problem that we are all hearing from in our constituents. So there are many, many tools in this tool chest, and the more we can develop, the better. Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say also that, just to add to it, every point that is being raised is very important. Anyone that have not seen the task force report should take a look at it. Housing affordability is going to take a lot of solutions, and it's going to take a lot of different people doing different things. Putting an apartment in a district is going to require the people in the districts to not say they don't want it. And so it's going to require zoning, it's going to require laws. I'm sorry. And then it's also going to require money from the government. And so what this bill is doing is taking care of the funding part by the government. The other aspect of it will still have to happen. I also want to say that part of what I'm proud of that we did a couple of bills back is that because the people that are talking about how do minority and small businesses benefit from Barnes Fund, that was a concern. We passed a bill that says 20% of Barnes Fund has to go to small businesses. So we're addressing this issue one at a time. It's going to take us looking at all of it, not in silos, but looking at different solutions. But we cannot say we're not going to do anything because we cannot solve it all at the same time. So I'm going to say, yes, this doesn't solve all of our problems, but I think having funding, no matter what the ideas are, no matter how good they are, without the funding, you cannot do anything. I also want to remind everyone that what Barnes Fund does is that it leverages this money for developers to go out and get more money to build. Some of this project cost $30 million. and we're only giving them like 10%, 20% of it. So we have to do this. We have to do this. Housing is a crisis. We need to do this. But does that mean that we cannot do other things? No. But we need to look into doing all of them. So I just wanted to provide that. And please look at the Housing Task Force recommendations. It talks about the issues, the problem, and the things that we all need to do, including talking to our neighbors and allowing zoning in their areas and also talking to the state. There's so many things, but this is a good first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in reference to a specific project in District 19, very familiar with the area behind Mary's, and it's interesting to think about a couple of implications there. One, a developer for one of the projects that's got relatively high price condominiums as a for sale product voluntarily offered to participate in something, but literally could not find a deed restriction partner across MDHA, Metro, and area community development corporations, right? So managing deeds for projects like this where you do want to preserve long-term affordability is still an ongoing challenge for the area. The other thing is, one of the things that is pushing up prices along that corridor where the downtown code extends is we've got full complexes of short-term rentals coming online that are non-owner occupied, right? And so we are building units. They are not always being used as housing. And when those units come online in those specific corridors, it pushes up prices correspondingly.
Thank you. And I had the opportunity to mention that to the Greater Nashville Realtors this week, and they looked surprised, but they noted. So I think that's a very valid point. Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to speak on something that Councilmember Suara spoke of in terms of the minority developers and nonprofits. Prior to the Barnes Fund, there was a neighborhood stabilization program that was created where there was a $30 million award given to the city of Nashville, and it was based on census tracts in Nashville, and there was 17 that qualified. 9 were in North Nashville. And there was no nonprofit organization, although there were nonprofit organizations who were chodos and had a focus on housing, but none of those were chosen, selected, or even asked to participate in any kind of way. After some consideration had been given by the Dean administration, $3 million came to the community for 5 organizations, which was used for acquisition and rehab, which was really not enough money in order for an adequate job to be done. However, had those organizations not gotten that monies and done what they did, then Nashville would not have met the benchmark that was required by HUD for them to do so. Since that time, the Barnes Fund has been created, and I can tell you that Woodbine Community Organization, which was one of those original organizations with Nashville Housing, has received probably about $10 million from the Barnes Fund, if not more. The Urban Housing Solutions has also received somewhere around $10 million. But I can tell you that those in the North Nashville community have collectively not received $5 million in all of this time. So I'm really, really concerned about what is happening with those funds and how it's benefiting certain organizations and not other organizations, especially in the communities where they are needed the most. And even if these organizations are building in those neighborhoods, in those communities, they are benefiting, but not those nonprofits that have been doing the groundwork all of that time. And Councilmember Virtue, I can tell you that some of those condos behind Mary's Barbecue sold for $700,000, and then as a stretch on Scoville Street that used to be property for the church sold for from $750,000 to $900,000.
All good points. And I will mention that
There has to be some more equity and some closing of the disparity that we are seeing when it comes to housing.
Nope.
Not only for those who are able to live and purchase or even rent, as well as those who are developing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just say another tool that we've recently created is the Community Land Trust, which, run by Marshall Crawford, offers the opportunity to lock in affordability for up to 99 years, which is something we haven't had. So, as we identify these shortcomings, we are slowly creating tools that enable us to just begin to do this better. So thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you. And I just want to make it a record that historically, those organizations within the North Nashville Consortium has requested to be a part of it, and they have not been able to do so. They don't have the capacity, and I think it's all by design that they've not been given the opportunity to build upon, because they've not, you've had that disparity like the 30 million, and which means 27 million and 3 million for 5 organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment on this substitute? I don't think we have yet voted on the substitute. Is that right? Okay, all those in favor, it's been moved and seconded, and a good discussion. All those in favor of the substitute, say aye. Any opposed? Councilmember Dreffel, did you wish to speak? Or was that your vote? Okay, great. Thank you. So now, Councilmember Sledge, do you want to move your bill as substituted?
Yes.
All right, is there a second? Thank you. We are voting on the bill as substituted. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 11 for, 1 against. Thank you. Councilmember Hurt.
Madam Chair, I was just wondering if it was any way that we could defer that to where we're able to really discuss some equity in the way those funds are dispersed. Because I know when we go with Barnes Fund, they determine basically how it is being used. So, I mean, the whole vote and all of that went pretty fast. And I was just wondering if it was any way that can be a discussion.
Let me ask. Or do you want to discuss that on the floor tomorrow night?
Can we ask to move? Okay, I can discuss it tomorrow. Thank you.
So I guess what's the question? Is it that whether this bill can be deferred?
Yes.
This bill could be deferred on the floor tomorrow night. It's
Okay.
still eligible for deferral, but it was approved by the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis may be able to provide some more information on the work we're beginning to do on capacity building, because I think that's a really important point. Next, RS 2021-1263, sponsors Gamble, Johnston, Allen, Bradford, and Style. This appropriates $9,069,614 in American Rescue Plan Act funds to general services to expand the vehicle fleet of Metro Nashville Police Department, Nashville Department of Transportation, and Davidson County Sheriff's Office. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Mendez.
I'm sorry, somebody was bending my ear. What resolution is this?
We are on the second resolution, RS 2021-1263, which is the $9 million in American Rescue Plan funds for fleet.
Yeah. So on this one, my sense is that with COVID not being over and us about to dip into the next big surge, and us still being at the relative beginning of deploying the ARP funds, that I don't think upgrading fleet at this time is the right thing to do with the money, and so I'm not going to support this one. I want to appreciate the letter we got from Chief Drake over the weekend. I think he makes a good argument about why the department may need vehicles. But if we didn't have the federal COVID relief dollars for people who are still hurting in the middle of a pandemic, we'd have to figure out some other way to do this. The fact is, that we got behind on upgrading fleet when we refused to pass a rate increase for the better part of a decade, and the hangover from that's still going on. So there is a need, but the main charge from the comptroller was that we should match recurring expenses with recurring revenue. And if we've got fleet problems and we want to change the way that we staff officers on the street, that's a recurring expense, and dropping a bunch of one-time federal COVID relief dollars on what will be a recurring expense is not what the comptroller suggested. Like, it violates the one main thing the comptroller had to say to us. And there's too many people directly in need, and I think the ethos of the spending should be to get the money on the street in Nashville, not in, Ford's coffers. So the need's real. I appreciate it. We need to figure out some way where the city's recurring revenue pays for our recurring expenses like fleet and focus our money elsewhere. And so I'm not going to be able to support this one. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Suara, then Johnson, then Toombs.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question or two, and I don't know if anyone can answer it. Of the fleet that we want to buy with this money, with the $8 million, how many of them are new? How many of them are replacements? Do we know?
I have Council Commander Gilder, I believe, and also Velvet Hunter coming up. I'll let y'all decide who's going to take that. I believe this one is all new, but we'll get it from the
These
authority.
are all additions.
These are all additions.
They are.
So we're not replacing what we already had because they were old?
Correct.
There's another bill coming up that's replacements.
That's right.
All right.
It's really confusing.
It is. The reason why I was asking the question is that, along with what Councilmember Mendez was saying, we really have to be very careful with federal funding, because if it's something that we're supposed to budget for ourselves and use ourselves, we cannot use federal dollars for it. It's called supplanting. It's just what it is. And so I wanted to check whether this was just solely something we were supposed to budget for and pay for, not just a need that arises out of COVID. What I want to say also is that I also see that we have about 3 or 4 resolutions that also has some fleets in it. I saw. So what is the difference between the 50 that we're buying from? I think there's a 50 and there's a 46. On the 4 million, there's a 46, and then there's another one where there's a 50. What's the difference between those 3, please?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because it really is confusing. And I've got a cheat sheet here to help me walk you through it. And I regret that I didn't say earlier when Councilmember Parker asked about what you could do to help General Services. But approving replacement of vehicles is the main thing that will help us keep these vehicles on the road, out of the shop. We've made a lot of progress toward that in the last few years. We had a $120 million backlog a few years ago, and we are down to, assuming assuming this legislation is passed, we'll be down to $50 million. That's a huge step forward. So. As we talked about the ARP funds, what you're looking at right now is 142. They are all additions. Later, there's a $4 million fund balance appropriation, and those are all replacements. That's a total of 83 vehicles, and 50 of those are for the police department. They're all replacements. Then there is a 4% legislation, and that is for 28 vehicles. 23 of those are for the police department, and those 28 vehicles are out of service at this time. So they're replacing vehicles that were in our fleet but were wrecked or beyond repair and are completely out of service. Does that help at all? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the other resolution would get us to where we are right now, but just make sure we have better vehicles than old ones.
It sure would. It would help us a lot. So we've replaced with the capital funding that you just approved, and hopefully with the 4% that you'll approve tonight, that will help us replace 427 vehicles. if we have the ARP, the capital, the 4%, and the fund balance. That's our fiscal year 22 funding request.
And that
And I'm
includes.
sorry, I should not have said replace that, because that does include that 427 does include those additions that you ask about in ARP.
Oh, okay. And then the 46 patrol cars in the 11 million in the general reserve fund as well, right? It included that as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions.
So I was just looking at all the bills that we've passed in the last 2 meetings and all the patrol cars and police vehicles that are on there. And I think that it's very important that we replace very old vehicles. I think I'm for that. I also like what the chief says. I think that we don't want officers passing COVID to each other because they're using the same car all over. So that's very legitimate. But I do think that considering the fact that we're about to buy 400 vehicles, and also consider the fact that if we decide that this is something we needed to do, and this is a replacement we need to do, then I will recommend that we use general funding, we use other sources of funding to be able to do this rather than the ARP money. I just, everything that we bring forward, I'm always very, and I know Ms. Mary Jo and the team have looked at it over and over again. If there's a way to separate this new addition, is it just because of COVID that we need 142? Or is it because of COVID we need 42 extra? If there's a way to separate it so that we're not supplanting, so that we're not using federal money just to get additional vehicles just because the money is there. So what do we need that we're supposed to pay for ourselves? If there's a way to separate it, I think that's what I'm leaning towards. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Johnston. And Gamble.
Thank you for recognizing me, even though I'm not on the committee. I think it's important for everyone to realize what a mess we inherited 2 years ago when we all were elected with our fleet issues. And Velvet mentioned it a moment ago, but we were $120 million in the hole as far as needs for fleet across the county. And we've done some things to mitigate that. Our codes department rents their fleet now 100% because we have to have those vehicles. We've already allocated for the fire department and OEM vehicles. And this resolution is allocating not only for the police department, but for the sheriff's office and our newly formed Nashville Department of Transportation. I learned today that, because one of the things Councilman Mendez talked about last meeting, whenever it was we just passed a $600 and whatever, or $500 and whatever million CSP. Like, you know, what are we doing with this? And now we're going to come. So I learned that CSP cannot pay for light fleet. It is only eligible to pay for heavy vehicles. What we're talking about here is light fleet, so sedans, things like that. We're not talking about trash trucks. That's heavier equipment that is appropriate for the CSP. So I don't think anybody is questioning the need for this, even the need for additional vehicles. We need additional police officers. We have less vehicles than we have officers. We have calls for service that are skyrocketing, and we don't have the ability to handle what is brought forth to us, which is why we're changing shift times and all of that so that we can put more officers on the street to handle calls for service. Our response time is not where we want it to be. It's not where the police want it to be. It's not where our constituents want it to be. We have got to be able to answer calls for service when people need us. Our first responders are our first line of defense, and they have to have vehicles to get to this place. This gift of ARP funds, again, I've said it every time I think I've stood up and talked about it, it's a gift. One thing I will agree with is that it's not necessarily a recurring expense because it is a capital expenditure, but we're in a hole. We're in a big hole. And so I do think that it's appropriate to use these funds, free funds, this gift, to help get us out of the hole. And then we need to talk about having a regular allocation out of the general fund to make regular, significant investments into our fleet. Because we go through police cars quickly, we go through trash trucks quickly, we're very hard on our fleet. So that's something that I don't think is a policy. If it is, it hasn't happened. And this is a problem that we've gotten ourselves into years and years and years and years of neglect. This didn't just happen overnight, and it didn't just happen from COVID. But again, it's a gift. So I also want to speak to the eligibility of these funds, and I'm going to let Mary Jo talk about that because she's way more of an expert, that we are allowed to use this for public safety, according to President Biden, but I'm going to let Mary Jo speak to that.
Ms. Wiggins?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's really important to keep in mind that the use of the funds is much broader than we had for CARES Act. One of the reasons that we had this third stimulus package was an outcry from the local and state governments during the CARES Act that there wasn't enough funding to really help with the local government and its budgets and meeting the deficits that were incurred because of the pandemic. So the intended use of these funds is much broader than it was for CARES Act, and it does include, even remember that there's a large section that is for lost revenue. And under that, government services and regular continuing operations is an eligible expense. So the fact that we're using these as more one-time and capital, in my opinion, is a step above reoccurring government services, but those are all eligible. So we're not going to forget our community. We're not going to forget ourselves. These funds were, to help our government stabilize, and we'll continue to have that balance between serving our community and how we serve the community, which is better response time, which is, more availability of our officers. So yes, these can be used. When we talked about public safety, President Biden put out a specific memo on community safety, the rise in violence and crime, and how can we address that. And he wanted cities to address that with the use of these funds. So that was a specific component made.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnston?
Thank you. I just hope that we can all look at this as truly the gift that it is, and help us dig out of the hole that we've been digging for ourselves for a really long time, and then get on a regular schedule. To Councilman Mendez's point, I agree to a certain extent, and I hope everyone approves.
Thank you. I've got a number of council members in the queue: Toombs, Gamble, Mendez, Sledge, and Vercher, in that order. Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at this resolution, it seems more to me of falling into the category of nice to have rather than need to have. And we haven't made any investments in our minority communities and small businesses that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and they're in a need to have status. If we were to approve all of the pending requests for our ARP funds, we would be at nearly $100 million. And again, no investment in minority communities and small businesses. And had we made significant investments in our minority communities and small businesses, I would feel more comfortable with this, because I understand why these departments want these things, but right now it just seems like a nice to have, and I think that we should focus on the needs first and then get to the nice to have.
Thank you. Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you for recognizing me, chairs. I don't serve on this committee. Having served on the ARP committee and heard the presentations from the departments, NDOT, DCSO, and MMPD about the need for services, and also seeing for myself firsthand how police cruisers are breaking down when we have police officers responding to service, coming to community meetings in our districts. I don't have the stats with me, but I'm sure that MMPD gets calls for service from across the entire city, all of our districts, some more than others. But the point is, when they do get those calls, we want to know, and for sure, that our police are able to respond in a timely and efficient manner. And it's our job to make sure that they have the resources and equipment that they need in order to do that. This is equipment, really. They need these vehicles to do their job in an efficient and effective way. The committee put off these requests with the first round of funding, with the CARES funding that we received. It was less funding. We had less time to spend it. We were in a critical, urgent state with COVID-19 at that point. Not that it's over now, but the committee made the decision not to fund or recommend funding of any of these fleet and other departmental requests with the first round of funding. We solely focused on the community needs, the small businesses, the rent and mortgage relief, the food relief, our residents' needs. With this second round, in the meantime, our fleet needs and other equipment needs for the departments didn't go anywhere. We still had them. In fact, they got exacerbated as the COVID-19 pandemic continued. So when we got the second round of funding, the ARP funding, most of us on the committee felt that we should address these issues, which were really carryover issues, in tandem with dealing with our community issues. And we've presented several resolutions already that deal with community needs, and you'll have a few more coming on January 4th that deal with community needs. But just the Affordable Barns Fund allocation that your committee just approved, just like that. This is another need for our city, for our community. And I would ask that the members look at this request as an equipment, a resource request for our departments to do the job that we need them to do to keep our city safe. And for those reasons, I support this, and I hope that you all will support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let committee members who haven't spoken on this issue go first, and then I'll circle back around. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you. This, I think, might be for Velvet, it might be for Mary Jo. I was having a conversation with a different department this week regarding vehicles, and they straight up asked me, "Are we able to ask for vehicles under ARP?" And the office was, and I'm just going to out them by saying this, it's our homelessness impact division, because they have their folks using their own cars to distribute supplies to affect the population. So mine is a process question on kind of how was this put out to I'm gonna say solicit departments to reply to their needs when it came to vehicle or fleet needs.
Ms. Wiggins.
Thank you, Chair. Last June, we sent an email to every single department and agency in Metro and asked for them to consider their needs as they respond to the pandemic, as they have recovered and are recovering from the pandemic, and to submit. We actually used the 4% fund form and had each department, each agency submit all of their requests using that form, some brief explanations, amounts, is it in budget, would it create future costs, et cetera, and accumulated all of those.
Gotcha. One thing I guess I would just ask as a consideration, and it's outside the scope of this, but I do think it's part of the conversation, is obviously there was turnover in that particular instance. When we're talking about the needs that are being discussed here regarding this department, regarding the police department, we do have other departments and offices, as Councilmember Johnson was mentioning, like our codes department that's renting. We have folks who are doing the work that these funds are asked to be expended toward as well regarding homelessness and the response. And I would just ask maybe if the administration is willing, is over the time we have, I know there's going to be some processes about community input and survey, maybe to loop back, because I think as we've been having all of these discussions on ARP, I think some light bulbs are starting to go off, and some department heads that we start having conversations on, and you may be having those conversations as well. And I just don't want to have looked up a few months from now and think we funded these requests because people got in line and got their stuff in and everything, but got in line in a way where we could have been a little bit more equitable in our response along the way if we just sort of circled back. So that's just my consideration here. I don't know where I am on this bill, just so everybody knows. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Vercher.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everyone, but but the fact of the matter is, do we want our department, our police department, coming to us in the same sentiment that our Metro Water Department just left us? And that is, they don't know when they're going to be able to pick up trash. Do we want our police officers, our police department coming up here informing us that they don't know when they're going to be able to get to calls for service? Committee members, I ask all of you, wherever you are on the spectrum of supporting police, support this. We can't keep continuing hurting our citizens because of ideologies. We know we need our trash picked up, and we know we want the police to come when we call them. I represent a district. A call is 4 hours. They're calling me like I'm the police now. Let's get these departments what they need, especially our police and our fire and OEM. We shouldn't even be debating this. It's simple. Committee members, support this so we can move on and go home.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. First of all, just because the federal law allows us to do it doesn't mean we should do it. You know, the hub survey hasn't been out yet even to gauge the community on how to spend this money. And Councilmember Johnston eloquently made the point about how this doesn't have anything to do with COVID. She talked about an inherited problem, $120 million behind on fleet when this term began. And yeah, because this body and the people who occupied the office downstairs wouldn't get the revenue for the city lined up in the right spot, and we screwed our employees on fleet for a bunch of years. And so, yeah, we were way behind on fleet. This is a recurring expense, the same way we're spending now. You know, these new cars will have to be replaced. It's a cent or two of property tax to start building up the money in order to replace the vehicles that we're talking about buying with this. I'm all for figuring out how to get these police cars with recurring revenue and having our tax base match being able to supply our police officers with an appropriate number of cars. But to the extent this ARP money, American Rescue Plan money, is a gift, to use a word of fellow council member, to get us out of the hole. Let's get the people of Davidson County out of a hole before the government out of its self-inflicted hole on being behind on capital. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, actually, it was a good lead-in, Councilman Mendez, but I was specifically responding to Council Lady Toombs. I want to get money into the hands of small businesses and support economic development and all of that, too. That was one of my big things with the CARES Act money, was let's help people that... These are not self-inflicted wounds of people. This is something that was a byproduct of something completely out of their control. Let's do what we can to help them. Those monies were not enough to do what we needed to do. We did have our economic development director on schedule to come meet with us in November. So as far as priority, getting in line, all of that stuff, there was, I'm not going to get into personal stuff, but there was some personal tragedy, and there's just, he was not able to come. And so that is what has pushed that back. But we had him there with an ask, a significant ask that I think would have sailed through not only the committee, but obviously the council as well, and we wouldn't be talking about where are our priorities. Our priorities are, I think, in line with everyone else's. We just had some timing issues. But yes, we would have dealt with this. We would have had economic development, small business support. We would have had all of that had he not had some things that were out of his control. So I just wanted to point that out.
And can you speak to, will those items come back around?
He is on our schedule. I'm sorry for interrupting. He is on our schedule for our next meeting in January, which I believe is it's either 13th or 14th. 13th? The 13th.
And there is still funding to be allocated?
Absolutely. We haven't, actually, Mary Jo, that's a good question. So out of the $260 million, and we're doing it in $130 million chunks, as of right now, with what's pending, how much have we allocated, or, what's been allocated and what is pending?
Ms. Weed.
Thank you, Chair. So the current appropriated, actually approved by council, is $29 million. And if you add in like the $40 million from the Barnes Fund and the other pending resolutions, including recently filed that are coming to council on January 4th, that will be a total of $95 million.
Okay.
Of the 260 or of the first 130.
So we have a significant amount left, a very significant amount left. And I hope that a lot of that, we can figure out a way to really impact our communities and down to our households and our small businesses. I think we're all on the same page there. It's just we've had a timing issue, honestly.
Thank you. Councilmember Suara. I don't see anybody else.
Bit brief, because we're just going to keep going around in circles. I think that everybody's already talked about why we want to make sure we need to do the fleet when we need it, and I'm not against that. But I do work in grants, and I think the language and the justification does matters. Everything that I've heard from the justification, from everything that we got, is that we're going to replace what we have. The things that we're missing that we should have funded ourselves, if we did not get the COVID money, we would have paid for it ourselves. This is money that we're supposed to spend ourselves. And I think the ARP money should not be used for that. Now, Ms. Wiggins will tell you that it does allow us to do lost revenues, and we can recoup some money based on lost revenue. We can do that. That is what we did with the CARES Act. When we were done with it, we were able to take our lost revenue, put it aside, and then use that the way that we wanted to. And I think that that's what I'm advocating for here, is that things that are not directly related, things that we're supposed to spend, rather than just use federal, somebody said it best, what we want and not just what we need to have, we can take it out of that lost revenue, part of it once we're done, and take care of all this stuff when it's time to do it. That's what I'm recommending. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glover and then Hurt.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify a couple of things I said earlier. This is not Metro incurring debt. This is our country incurring debt. This is not free money. And so I hope none of us are under the illusion that this is free, because it's not. We're incurring debt, and that's what I was talking about on the inflationary piece, et cetera. So I wasn't saying, and I just am clarifying, this isn't debt that Metro is incurring, but it's debt our country is incurring, because I promise you, we didn't have this money just sitting around at D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. When I first saw this legislation come forth, it concerned me a lot, because I, too, have been following the ARPA money and been in contact with the National League of Cities, who actually has a playbook on how this money is supposed to be spent and how it's to be used. And I did specifically ask about the police and the fleet and all of that. And there's a section in there where there is revenue recovery that can be used for such things, especially with first responders and all of that. Is it any way that we could possibly use some of the money that we have here with the ARPA money, and the other half that we use with our general services money that we have, and still accommodate what it is that we need for the police? Because that will relieve some of the money that's for ARPA, because you know I am so dead serious behind making sure that small businesses, small nonprofits, and community organizations are benefiting from this as the funds were designated from the very beginning. But like Councilmember Virtue said, I agree with everybody, and we just have to make a decision. So let's make a compromise. Let's find a solution of the problem that we have and possibly find this, because I do think that with that 34% increase that we had, that we ended up with more money than we had anticipated, and we need to use some of that money to take care of our government responsibilities.
Thank you. Councilmember Pulley, was your hand raised to speak? Okay, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of points I want to make here. We did just pass a resolution that added an additional $20 million onto requests for affordable housing funds, and I believe Ms. Davis indicated that it'll be June of next year before we'll be getting contracts on the first $20 million of that. So we won't even be able to start using the second $20 million until after that. And there's a concern raised about a $9.5 million fund because of concern about COVID moving forward, but we're willing to put that kind of money toward affordable housing that we won't be able to use for another 7 months. So I did support that because I certainly support the use of that money for affordable housing, but it's interesting that that concern comes on the heels of a fleet management bill that has the police department in it. And I also do not recall this robust discussion about fleet management when we passed OEM and fire fleet vehicles. So I just want to encourage you all to support this resolution. I certainly will be supporting it for those reasons. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good discussion. Any further discussion? I believe we probably will need a raise hands on this one. Ms. Knightley, if you can help me count. So we have had a good discussion on RS 2021-1263, appropriating $9 million to general services for fleet. All those in favor, please raise your hand high in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see 7, 9, 8. Will you keep your hands up until we are through counting? We're slow. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is for the allocation of $9 million in American Rescue Plan funds to the general services for the Metro vehicle fleet of the Police Department, Department of Transportation, DCSO. That's what we're voting on. One more time. Keep them high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. I count 8. Okay. All those against? 1, 2. Okay, thank you. 2 not voting? Okay, thank you for that. All right. I appreciate the thoughtfulness with which we approach that. Next is RS 2021-1276, sponsors Allen and Welsh, appropriates $100,000 from the general fund of the General Services District to the Center for Nonprofit Management, which has been selected to receive Public Safety Violence Reduction Pilot Grant funds. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Wiggins, can you just briefly explain how this will help other nonprofits actually use the funds for its intended purposes?
Chair, I'm happy to, but
Or Mr.
this
Button.
is something John Button's working on directly.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Allen. So when council set up the Community Safety Partnership Fund with governor's grant dollars, one of the things that the advisory board focused on very early on is we want to build capacity in addition to providing financial support to nonprofits. We want to help them do a better job with their operations and help them do a better job with fundraising. Our advisory board, which includes Councilmember Gamble and Councilmember Evans, suggested a partnership with the Center for Nonprofit Management. The Community Safety Coordinator, Ron Johnson, has developed a very close relationship with Dawn Stone, who is their Director of Outreach and Diversity. They've already started to work on assisting nonprofits with fundraising, with operations, with bookkeeping. A very important part of this measure is also to help nonprofits receive audits so that they can qualify for larger grants. Right now, Metro Ordinance caps grants at $5,000 for nonprofits that don't have audits. So this contract will also provide an avenue for nonprofits to seek those funds.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Sledge.
Just wanted to offer full support on this. I was at the ARP committee meeting, and it was very well explained, and the community leaders were there as well, speaking to the need for this. So thankful to John and his work on this, but I'm thankful to the community as well. But it's a really good program.
Great, thank you. And this is part of the capacity building that we need to be doing everywhere, so I appreciate that explanation. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? We recommend. Next is RS 2021-1278, sponsors Allen and Stiles, appropriates $4 million from the General Services Office of Fleet Management, undesignated fund balance for the purchase of vehicles for various departments of the Metro government. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Councilmember Mendez.
I'd just like to ask Director Zeitlin to explain for the viewing audience the difference between undesignated fund balance and 4% funds.
Ms. Zeitlin?
The undesignated fund balance is are funds that are unappropriated. The 4% fund is a certain percentage of revenue that's set aside to spend on equipment and repairs.
That we plan on every year.
Correct, in each operating budget.
Mr. Mendez?
So I'll tell you how I think about it. Tell me whether that's what you just said.
Okay.
So the way I think about it, the 4% funds, that's specifically built into the budget every year for certain expenditures. We have to set aside 4% for minor equipment replacement sort of things.
Correct, and that's mandated by the charter.
Right. And then undesignated fund balance, I think of, sometimes it's a little fuzzier for me, but that I think of if a certain department got appropriated an amount of money in past years and didn't quite spend it all, there's some undesignated balance that accumulates over time. And then occasionally, if it builds up to enough, then it can get appropriated for something. Is
Correct.
that about right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that distinction. Other, Councilmember Glover?
Thank you, Chair. And I want to continue in this vein. This is one of the things that I've asked repeatedly over the past years is when there's money like this left over. And the same, I mean, I don't know on the 4%, have we spent 100% of that money every year? We have spent 100%? Okay. The one thing that's always concerned me is when we have money left over, why it's getting rolled this way. So, I mean, I know the way that it works, but it's just, it seems to me that we should be trying to lower taxes as opposed to raise taxes as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Other, Councilmember Suara?
Do we know what our percentage of fund balance is after we've used this part of the reserve? I know there's a statutory requirement to maintain a certain percentage. So now that we're taking out of that, are we still within that? Do we know what the percentage is right now?
I have, your mic is hot. I'll let y'all decide who's going to answer that. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, my question is, there's a statutory requirement for our fund balance that we cannot go below the percentage. So what percentage are we right now after we take out this 11 million?
Okay, and I think we need to distinguish, there is undesignated fund balance, there is 4% fund, and then there are other things. This is from the, this is from the undesignated fund balance that we're talking about.
I'm on the next, sorry.
So do you want to get?
Bill.
Okay, we'll answer that question later, I think. Councilmember Sledge, I see you waving your mic.
Apologies if General Services answered this on a previous bill, but on this $4 million, the notes I have say we'll purchase 83 interceptor utility vehicles that include 50 from MPD, 21 for DCSO, 9 for parks, and 3 for fire. My question was, is those, we have been told the previous allocation that those were hybrid vehicles, or is that the same for this one as well?
Ms. Hunter.
Yeah, thank you. Velvet Hunter, General Services. No, these are not hybrids because we were fortunate enough to find these 83 vehicles on lots in Middle Tennessee at this time. So we want to grab those with this funding. I think the hybrids that you're referring to are the ARP additions. Those are ones that we would have a chance to order. We'd have to order, and we would order hybrid.
Okay, so these, what year are these, the model year?
They are 22s, right? Yeah.
Okay, whereas the ones we'd be ordering would be 23s or 22s?
23s. 22s or 23s are what we would be ordering. We feel really lucky that we found these for the police department and the other agencies available, because we know there's a long lead time when you have to order.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
I just wanted to follow up on a point that Councilman Glover raised. Through the last term, there was sort of a budget dance that a lot of departments did where they didn't quite need everything that they had in their budget, and then not spending it all would give them some flexibility, and that's where some of the fund balance came up. And in the first year of this term, when I was Budget and Finance Committee Chair and the Mayor's office was working on the financial crisis, I think, and maybe Ms. Wilson knows or somebody, but I think there was a lot of a concerted effort to kind of kill off that practice of having built-in fluff every year, and that was part of the savings that got accomplished to make ends meet, if I'm remembering correctly. Just to let people know that I think there was a lot of work done at the beginning of this term to try to cut down on that, building up fund balance unnecessarily.
Ms. Wilson?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. There have been a lot of reviews of these funds, special purpose funds, for example, that have been looked at just to make sure that we are expending out of them regularly. And I want to be clear, most departments don't have some way to squirrel away dollars at the end of the year. It goes just right down into our undesignated reserve overall. So this is just a situation in which we have a special fund that's around general services and fleet that they were able to access. And then I also wanted to come back, I realize we'll talk probably more about 4% in a minute, but on the 4% side, we do authorize each year fully that amount. And again, I'll come back to it later when we come. But not always are all the funds expended within that year. We do a big paper usually in June. So for example, Velvet could tell you that we did a lot of fleet ordering out of that June 2021 paper for the last fiscal year. Those cars have not yet been received due to some of the supply chain issues. And so there are situations in which there's also some residual amounts in there. I just want you to be aware that if you were to look, you would find money it's sitting in 4% where we're out still procuring.
In the act that just came out. Councilmember Glover, and I will point out it is 10 till 7, and we do have a lot of other items to go.
I think the point that she just brought up is important, and I want to make sure clarification is given here, please. Even though that we hadn't been delivered, it's still, that allocation is not coming out of today's, it's coming out of yesterday's. Just, if you could clarify that, please, because I think that's a very important point.
Sure, I'm happy to say the authorizations today, either in this paper or the upcoming 4% one, are not any of the past authorizations that have occurred.
Okay, good clarification. Any other questions on this? All right, are we ready to vote on RS 2021-1278? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We recommend, are we still 12? I think we have had, non-committee members have left. Great. Next is RS 2021-1279. Sponsors Allen appropriates $11,427,500 from the General Fund Reserve Fund for the purpose of equipment and building repairs for various departments of the Metro government. This is the famous 4% fund. So, Councilmember Mendez. It's been moved and seconded. Thank you so much. Councilmember Mendez.
It's a small question, but I saw there's a $60,000 roof repair for the baseball stadium in here, and I guess I would have thought that with having $1 gazillion worth of bonds on it, there'd be some capital reserve to have $60,000 worth of roof repairs done for it. I guess I'm interested in learning more about that.
Can someone from the administration speak to that? Or, here we go. Y'all will introduce yourselves and educate us.
Monica Faulknerson, Executive Director of the Sports Authority. It's a good question, but there is no capital reserve plan for First Horizon Park as we have with some of our other facilities. So capital improvements, we have not really had to make any. The lease agreement between the Sports Authority and MFP Baseball does require a capital asset management plan to be presented to the Sports Authority beginning in the 7th year, so we will start that this spring.
Thank you for the forthright answer. Chair, I know it's 10 to 7, but I swear to God,
Go for it.
Didn't that stadium cost like $50 million more than was like on paper for? It was like going to be like 40 million and it cost like 90 or something. Like what the heck are we doing? It's just really just hard to believe that for all the really bright minds that went into financing that, and the freaking AT&T building, property taxes are still being used to finance it, built with a TIF loan in 1989, still no capital reserve fund. I don't even know what to do with that. I'm just gonna sit down.
Councilmember Van Rees.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted, having attended some of the Sports Authority meetings, want to speak to the fact that these repairs were found because of some storm damage that was done. And these are repairs that the insurance company determined that was not applicable. And so there was extreme due diligence in regard to this. It has my support.
Thank you. Councilmember Glover, and then Virtue.
Thank you, Chair. And I think what Councilman Mendez brings up is exactly right. This is why I get very concerned when we're rushing things through. And we do on that particular deal. You and I were here. I'm not sure who else was here, but that deal got rushed through in the 11:30th hour, and then we ended up spending millions upon millions upon millions of dollars more for it. And these types of things were not built into the equation. And it's just, it is mind-boggling how we will rush through things at certain times, and we don't think about this part of it. So anyway, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Virtue.
Thank you so much, Chair. My ears perked up when I heard this was storm damage and the insurance didn't cover it. So what type of insurance is on the facility?
Ms. Falk-Knudsen, can you answer that one?
After the 2020 tornado with the damage that was done and the insurance claim was filed, while they were assessing the damage, they found additional damage that was determined not to be related to the tornado, and so we were not able to file a claim against that. And so we have spent a lot of time and resources trying to get an estimate. We felt like the estimate that came back was high. We had roofing resources come and just do an analysis, and so we have, as Councilmember Van Rees said, we have spent quite a bit of time trying to be diligent in this and getting the number down to a number that we believe is right. A lot of the damage they believe was storm damage, but not related to the tornado. So there's a lot of tears and punctures and scars that just have just come over the years and are not subject to warranty or anything like that.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Virtue.
I'm kind of like Councilman Mendez. I mean, when was it, a week or two ago, we $15 million for a parking lot. So what's another $60,000 for a roof? So I think I'll sit down too.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Plea.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not sure there's a whole lot we can do about what happened back when this was built and the overspend or the over budget price that this cost us. We're left with where we are now. And I very much appreciate Ms. Fox-Knudsen being forthcoming with that information. I'm sure she would very much appreciate it if we'd like to establish a capital fund for her to do these expenses. So I guess maybe it's on us to try to figure that out. But in the meantime, we've got to deal with what we've got to deal with now. So I definitely support this, and I support looking forward to maybe coming up with a better way to help the Ms. Fox-Knudsen in her issue of funding capital expenses in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. We'll put it on the to-do list. Any other questions? Councilmember Saguaro.
It could be redundant, I don't know. But I was trying to figure out this 60,000, was it repairs on its own, or was it part of replacing the entire roof as part of the additional cost to what the insurance is paying? I'm trying to determine whether it's really a capital expenditure or if it's repairs and maintenance. So that's what I'm trying to to check.
Ms. Faulkner?
Again, the lease agreement between the Sports Authority and MFP Baseball does obligate Metro, the Sports Authority, for all roof repairs. So we are responsible for capital, but roof repairs and structural, all of those things are the obligation of the Sports Authority.
So, Miss Mary Jo, so this 60,000 repairs is adding to the life of the roof. It's not just minor repairs. I don't know what roof repairs cost.
Ms. Weeds?
Thank you, Chair. Well, keep in mind that 4% is not in our capital spending plan. So these 4% are kind of like our light equipment repairs expenditures. So they're not going to be added to the life of the roof.
Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Faulkner, thank you for answering our question, and we'll talk later about this capital fund. That's being a good steward. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? We recommend approval. Next is RS 2021-1280. Sponsors Allen authorizes the issuance and sale of water and sewer revenue bond anticipation notes in an amount not to exceed $200 million at any one time in the form of commercial paper of Metro government, and authorizes one or more dealer agreements, issuing and paying agency agreements, credit facility agreements, and providing for certain other matters related thereto. Ms. Wiggins, can you just briefly explain again we have Ms. Bosch here. If you can just remind us how this commercial paper program works and what this is doing. I'm sorry, do I have a motion? I see a motion and a second. Thank you for pointing that out. It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Bosch.
Hi, as you may recall.
You're recognized.
Hi, Michelle Bosch here. As you may recall, we use the commercial paper program as a bond anticipation note, which basically means we're just using that to fund capital projects until we can issue debt to cover the expenses.
And yes, in our next bill, we'll talk about the $200 million as opposed to $100 million, so we'll come to that in a second. Councilmember Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's kind of hard not to kind of combine this with that. So the question I've got is, obviously we had a massive rate increase with water. Now we're talking about expanding the commercial paper piece and then taking on this bond. Is there an anticipation for when rates with water would have to go up again, or did we have enough foresight to build in the inflationary pieces into it that it actually will cover that to where people in Metro will not anticipate or don't have to worry about another massive water rate increase?
I think that's Amanda Deaton-Moyer who's at the back to answer that one. Ms. Moyer?
Thank you, Councilmember. The rates that are in place presently, as in our ordinance, do go up every calendar year. This year it'll be 3%. Next year is 3%, followed by 2%, or the CPI, whichever is higher. And so that's some time away from now. And yes, all of this is contemplated, and our capital plan was contemplated, and this is part of that it is built all together. And of course, you'll recall that every 5 to 7 years, we'll do a cost of service study to ensure that it remains contemplated for the time period.
Okay, so that was important, I believe, because we were diligent on the way that we approached this, and I know nobody was real happy about it, but this was something that needed to happen. So then my final question, are we on task for getting the repairs that need to be done in order to bring our water facilities up to where they need to be? And when are we anticipating those being, I don't want to say adequate because they're adequate now, but when will they be repaired to where we kind of remove some of the worry that we've had in the past?
Thank you. I believe we have Ms. Deaton-Moore here to answer that question as well.
Thank you. So obviously our aging infrastructure is an ever-going process, as you know, but our consent decree is underway. If you drive past on Second Avenue, you can see the plant project is going very smoothly and going quickly. And so our consent decree ends in 2028 to 2030, but there will be additional processes after that, and we're continually doing lots of infrastructure throughout the community. To say that we are when is it going to end? I can't say that because it's a 6-year capital plan. It's billions of dollars, and every year we add another year. So, but we are certainly making good progress to that end.
All right, and thank you, Chair, for the indulgence. I knew we needed to combine it, but I think they were important questions.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Good questions. Any other questions on this? Councilmember Suara.
Thank you. And for me, too, is also kind of combined. And I know she's tired of hearing me say this. I understand that we have all those infrastructure things that we need to do. That's why we increased the rate. That's why we're increasing the amount from 100 to 200 million. But the conversation we've always had is that with the rate increase, with the audit that was done, we have a whole lot of money that is just sitting there that we're not using. And so did we factor that fund balance or the leftover money? Because remember, we talk about the audit that you did that says you're building up, you have a higher percentage than what is required by the state. And so before we go ahead and get some more debt, we factor in what we already have as part of what we're going to use for these infrastructural expenses. Capital expenses.
So we are actually expending 3 types of funding. One is our balance, and we use that for near-term projects that don't have an extensive life. We also have money that we received as part of our latest bond issue, which is a lot of the consent decree related projects, debt funded. And then we have our commercial paper program, which is what we're discussing today, which we will eventually refund with our debt issue. And those things that are funded with our debt issue are largely are selected by those that provide larger intergenerational equity.
Just wanted to make sure that we're using that balance.
We're doing the best we can.
And I just added that. Thank you.
Appreciate that question from the accountant among us. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Vercher.
Chair, I know it's late.
It's late.
Can you request from the Water Department any outstanding payments that we need from vendors where they've damaged our infrastructure? That's part of this issue as well, too. When they damage our infrastructure, we go out and pay it and then wait on them to pay us back. If we can get that report.
Outstanding.
Yeah, what it is when
Right.
and I don't want to use a particular company, but I'm Fiber Mendez, and I go out and dig up a fiber line, but I hit your water main, and I damage your water main. As a city, we don't wait on them to fix it. We go out and fix it, and then we bill them.
And so, okay, yes, we will get that. And we'll let you know where to find that information. Thank you for that question. Next is, okay, any other questions on this one? All those, are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? We recommend approval. We still 12? Okay, great. Next is RS 2021-1281. This is a companion bill, amends resolution RS 2015-1417 to increase the size of the water and sewer revenue extendable commercial paper program of Metro government from a maximum aggregate principal amount not to exceed $100 million to a maximum aggregate principal amount not to exceed $200 million. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. It was actually 11. Thank you. Any questions on this one? We kind of discussed it in the previous bill. Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? We recommend approval. That's 12 in favor. Next is RS 2021-1282. Sponsor is Allen. This determines a plan for expenditure of a direct appropriation grant from the state of Tennessee in the amount of $5 million. Do you have a motion? That was very quiet and seconded. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? You recommend approval. Next is several things on consent, which we will sail past. RS 2021-1290, sponsors Allen, Bradford, Welsh, and Suara, approves an American Rescue Plan Act grant from the Tennessee State Library and Archives of the Metro Nashville Public Library to upgrade the Limitless Libraries website to foster educational attainment and equity by providing public library materials and services. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's 11. We recommend approval. Next is RS 2021-1291, sponsors Allen Bradford Welsh and Stiles. This approves amendments to a grant contract between Diamond in the Rough Incorporated and Metro Government and a grant contract between Nations Ministry Center and the Metro Government for the provision of free and high-quality after-school programs through the Nashville After Zone Alliance. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Vercher, did you have a question? Councilmember Vercher.
Is this we're entering into an agreement with the church?
No, that is not a church.
Okay.
Ms. Wiggins, do you want to, and I want to also ask you the opportunity to explain the difference between the Community Partners Fund and the direct appropriations real quick.
Yes, Chair.
We're going to do this several times during the year.
This contract was actually a Community Partnership Fund contract. It was awarded last year and services began. It was just a contract that accidentally was not brought before council for final approval. So this was part of the $200,000 that was appropriated for Community Partnership Funds, and it's just one of those contracts.
So we have two ways that we give money to nonprofits. We have the
Yeah,
community
Chair, I got
partnership.
it. So it's the Nations Ministry. Are they subcontracted to NASA?
I have Anna Harudyanan. I can't pronounce it.
The Nations Ministry Center.
Who's going to answer that question?
Hello, good evening. Yes, this is part of NASA partnerships, and the reason why we're requesting amendment to these two contracts is usually we pay transportation separately for all school-based programs, but because of the shortage of school buses this year, some of our partners had to go with alternate transportation, and these two were able to get charter buses, which are more expensive than what we pay to MMPS buses, which is $175 a day. But just for the equity purposes, we wanted to go ahead and reimburse them at the same rate that we pay for MMPS, just to cost share with these two programs.
Thank you.
At Lead Southeast and Lead Brick Church.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The analysis kind of made it sound a little murky. Thank you, I'm good.
Yes, but all of these are part of already existing NASA budget.
Yeah,
We're
thank
not
you.
asking for extra.
After school program, which is great for kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. Now we're ready to vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? I think we're down to 10. Okay. You recommend approval? You counting me? 9 in favor, 0 against. Next is RS 2021-1292. Sponsors Allen and Young approves a contract between Metro Government and Womble LLC for the provision of heavy equipment rentals and associated equipment rental services. Do I have a motion? It moved and seconded. Any questions? Councilmember Suara.
Thank you. In looking at the analysis, the contract sum is about 2.5 million, and it looked as if it's a sole source, but I did not see the sole source justification that typically accompanies sole source contracts. There was only one company that got it. No other person was there, so.
Can someone from administration or the department answer that one?
If we can get it by tomorrow, I was just
We'll have
looking
that
at the details, yeah.
We'll find that out for you
All right.
by
Okay,
tomorrow,
we'll try to have that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you, sole source. All right, look for an email on that. All right. We are on RS 2021-1292, provision of heavy equipment rentals and associated rental services. Councilmember Sledge.
Thanks. This might go along with Councilmember Suara about getting this tomorrow, but this, it is heavy equipment. I'm just trying to figure out what NDOT's using it for, because it's a lot. And I just didn't know if it was just general operations or if there was.
Okay, I think we have a representative from NDOT here.
Hi, Shanna Whitelaw, representing NDOT right now. This is actually, thanks. This contract will be used by both water, parks, and NDOT as necessary in a rental. The reason it's separate than what we call heavy equipment, this is when we rent the equipment and we also get the operator with it. So time is of the essence. If there's any way to be able to use it for any of these things that we're not able to get equipment with right now, it'd be very helpful for us. So that's, and it is a long-term contract, so it'd be as on demand.
Gotcha, okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yes, it does. Thank
Can
you.
you answer that sole source question?
I believe that it's not a sole source. I believe there was only one one bidder at the
Response.
time, but I do want purchasing to confirm that.
Okay, so if you can get us that information, that would be great. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Back up to 12. Okay, 12 in favor, 0 against. Next is RS 2021-1294. Sponsor is Allen, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the personal injury claim of Annette and Mark Buscemi against Metro government in the amount of $9,500. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Sawara.
Thank you. This one, and I just want the Department of Law to comment. I don't know the rationale. I just look at this settlement every time I see them and just read through them. But what I see that has been consistent in all the years that I've been reading them is that often the Department of Law will recommend to reimburse the person for their costs, actually whatever they paid out in medical bills, and sometimes add an additional amount to it. So in reading this particular one, the individual actually spent $13,300, but we only pay $9,500, and it just jumped at that. It's a deviation from what we normally do, and I don't know if there was a reason for it. It was just an observation.
Hello, Tom Cross with Metro Legal. This is a negotiated settlement, and so I can't explain exactly what was on the plaintiff's mind, but they may have felt that there was a reason to accept less than their out-of-pockets in this case. And in this one, there were questions about the severity of the injury, and there may have been some about liability as well.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? We recommend approval. Next is RS 2021-1296, sponsors Allen, Evans, and Stiles. Approves the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant from the United States Department of Justice to the Nashville Police Department to support a broad range of activities to prevent and control crime, including technology upgrades, supplies for direct support, in-service, and specialized training. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? You recommend approval. Next is, some consent. Moving on to RS 2021-1301, sponsors Allen, Welsh, and Sawara. Approves a coordinated entry grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to the Metro Social Services Department to fund the position of a coordinated entry special project coordinator to help strengthen access to coordinated entry for individuals. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? You recommend approval. Next is RS 2021-1302, sponsors Allen, Welsh, and Sawara. Approves an HMIS development support grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to the Metro Social Services Commission Homeless Impact Division to pay for software and ongoing staff education. Been moved and seconded. Any questions? Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? You recommend approval. Next is RS 2021-1303, sponsors Toombs, Hurt, and Taylor. Requests the COVID-19 Financial Oversight Committee to recommend to the Metro Council the appropriation of not less than $70 million in the American Rescue Plan Act funds to the Mayor's Office of Economic and Community Development for disadvantaged communities, with particular emphasis on Bordeaux and North Nashville, and for funding of the Nashville Small Business Recovery Fund. Do I have a motion? Been moved and seconded. Any questions? Let's see, Councilmember Glover and then Toombs. Councilmember Toombs, I'll let you go first as a sponsor, and then Councilmember Glover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this resolution came about because, as I alluded to in earlier comments, that the amount of money we're allocating from the ARP funds is steadily increasing. We're quickly approaching $100 million in allocations, and we haven't done anything for minority communities and small businesses. And so I thought that it was important to shine a spotlight on that and to make sure it's a priority, because that is one of the main purposes of those ARP funds, is to help those communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. However, I do want to give the committee process the opportunity to do what it does and to consider the proposal, as well as to give Mr. Pogue, Director Pogue, more opportunity to appear before the committee and to work with him to make sure it's a robust proposal. So I do want to move to defer 2 meetings.
So defer to the second meeting in January.
first meeting in February.
First meeting February. I believe that's February 1. Okay. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to defer to February 1. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? You recommend deferral to February 1. Next, we have bills on second reading. Bill 2021-1013 sponsors Van Reese, Allen Withers, and Lee, approves the lease agreement between the Metro Board of Education and Liberty Collegiate Academy. Do you have a motion? I think it's been moved and seconded. It was kind of quiet. Now, my understanding, Ms. Zeitlin, if you can explain what we need to do with the substitute.
So 2 substitutes appeared in the packet, one for 1013 and one for 1015. They were adding the letter M to the proposal number. We've since found that the versions that were on file in the clerk's office actually have that M in the proposal number. So the legislation's been updated online and the substitutes are no longer necessary.
Okay. So we have a motion for the bill as submitted, and we don't need to substitute. Any questions on the bill as submitted? Councilmember Glover.
Is there anyone here from MNPS?
I was called earlier by MNPS and told that they would not be able to be here tonight. They had sent some information as requested from David Profit on the market studies that led to this price, but they would not be able to be here tonight.
Okay. Well, okay, then I'm not going to be able to support tonight because I want to know if any discussions are going on as far as buying versus the leasing, et cetera. And apparently they're not here to answer the questions. So I don't know. What's the time-sensitive nature of this?
There's none, and they said they would be willing to accept a deferral if we needed to do that.
Then I'm going to move we defer one meeting because I'd like to ask those questions, please.
Been moved and seconded for one meeting deferral. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We defer one meeting. Next is BL 2021-1015, sponsors Allen Withers, Roberts, and Lee. This approves the lease agreement between the Metro Board of Education and Nashville Prep. This was deferred in planning. Does that make it automatically deferred for us? Sorry. Say that officially.
This was deferred one meeting last meeting, which was the automatic deferral. It was deferred in planning and zoning, but it would not be an automatic deferral on the floor.
Okay. So it's up to us. So if we want to defer it, we need a motion to defer.
So do we need to move for discussion and then move for discussion?
Okay. It's been moved and seconded.
Now I would like to move for a one meeting deferral.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded for one meeting deferral. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You recommend a one meeting deferral. The last item is on consent. I believe we are done. Is there any other business we need to do? All right, it's not even 8 o'clock. Good job.